Welcome back to Saruwatari Xtreme. Thanks to all of you that have put questions regarding my past and my life after racing in the comments, and all of you that have sent questions to me via messaging and Instagram. I do appreciate that. However, it would really help the channel out if you could put your questions in the comments. That helps the YouTube side out, and Instagram is really a function of me just trying to promote the YouTube channel. But if you really just don't want anyone to see your question and you want to send it over through Instagram, go ahead and do that, and we'll take those into consideration as well. Now, a lot of you that actually wanted me to do the special on your questions of my life after racing, and also those of you that have come over from Christian's channel, there's a lot of you that haven't presented any questions. And I wasn't sure what exactly was going on, and that's part of the reason we're having this episode, is to try and find out if you have any questions. I would hate for you to miss out since I'm really doing this for you guys. So I did look at the video itself and was able to figure out that a lot of you actually were only watching around 8 minutes of the video. And so maybe some of you missed the tail end, and that's where I said that I am actually moving forward to do the special video you requested, and I've talked to Christian, and he's going to be interviewing me, but he would also like to hear the questions that you have regarding my life before I retired from racing. So if you want to send all that stuff over, we're going to get all that stuff in the works sooner than later. I, of course, will handle the special video on my side regarding my life after racing first. And as soon as Christian's time opens up and my window opens up on this side, I'll get up there so we can take care of that interview for all of you. But since we're all here anyway, it's a great time to give you kind of an update on the RX-7. And I'm afraid that I really just don't have a whole lot of good news, but it's just the way it goes. Some of you may have noticed when the 7 came out, the brake reservoir was low, and I wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but I didn't want to comment until I actually got into it. And part of the reason that the intake manifold hasn't been put on is because of the things that I found here. There's a pretty long list of problems going on, so I'll just run through it real quick. But when I went inside to push down the brake pedal, the clutch pedal, they went to the floor. After investigating, it would appear that I've lost the brake master cylinder, the clutch master cylinder, the line lock solenoid is frozen, and the slave cylinder is frozen. Also, I have no idea the condition of all the brake calipers, but most of the bleeder screws are frozen. So this is pretty much bad times. Quite the delay. I have parts on order, and as all of you talk about these project cars, it's just been great because Mazda no longer makes the brake master cylinder, or any of these components for that matter. The wrong parts were sent, and I'm just going round and round. So I'm hoping this week the right parts make it, which will allow us to push forward. And because Abel did all the modifications with the G-force, I didn't even know what slave cylinder I needed. So luckily he figured it out and he sent it to me. So we're in good shape there, moving forward, but yet still a lot of delays. On top of that, there's a slightly larger problem that's come about. And it's just come to my attention, and I started working on it, and I'll share all of it with you. So possibly, maybe it will help you in the future. I don't know how this would exactly translate to your own cars. But when you run race cars, I always feel it's a good idea to run different computers for different cars because you have all the log data, all the maps, you never want to get confused. This would be the RX-7 computer. This would be the NSX computer. All the information to run these cars are contained on these computers. This computer, which is the RX-7, no longer works because I tried to power it up and it just does not work. It does power up, but nothing comes up. So my friend Simon from Motec, who helped me originally with the 7, was kind enough to talk to me about it. And his suspicion is that the computer's been sitting so long that the motor for the hard drive has grease in it, and the grease is solidified and it will no longer turn. So he had me do a myriad of things such as putting it in the sun, trying to warm it up, trying to get it to work. There has just been no luck. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. So all of the engine management information is on here, which I can't access. But when I got the NSX, I bought a Motec ADL, which is the dash. And I only had one. Since I wasn't going to run the RX-7 anymore, I figured I would use the RX-7 dash as the backup, as I need to run backups for everything. The problem is that this backup for the NSX is the RX-7 dash, but it has the configuration for the NSX, and these are all configurable, everything, top to bottom. That is a major problem because the M4 Motec that runs the RX-7 has a limited number of inputs and outputs, controls very little in the vehicle. The ADL controls the majority of everything from top to bottom. Even the cooling system, the cooling fans, everything is controlled by this. So without that configuration, I am back to square one. So we don't really know exactly what the options are. I mean, prevalently, it's possible Simon can rebuild the program and send the configuration out to me. When you buy a very expensive engine management system like a Motec, the great thing about it is that you're buying, at the time, definitely what was considered the best. And they did all the wiring for me. So the great thing is, when you have your cars wired, if you're going to go that route, I highly suggest you go to professional. And when you do it, spend the money to get all the diagrams. This book is full of information of how the RX-7 is wired. All the inputs and outputs for the M4, the ADL, wiring diagrams, much like stuff you would see for your car from the factory. This is really great stuff. The problem with this is that when you're running a race car, oftentimes you'll be at the track, things will come up, you'll have to change things, sensors won't work, you'll need to use a different sensor, a better sensor. If you're using cavalcos, you need a different range. A lot of those notes never make it into the book. So the problem is that trying to decipher and figure out what sensor is actually in the car. After all that time, I've been looking, a lot of them don't even have their indications or part numbers on them anymore. It's all worn off. That's a headache. So this can all be figured out, but it is just a ton of time. And I just hope that we can get all this sorted fairly easily. But even Simon has warned me that it's just going to be a lot of time involved and it's going to push us back like crazy. So all we can do is keep pushing forward and I give the information to you. Now there's something else. According to Simon, they're not aware of any M4 that's been sitting for around 20 years. And even though the M4 is solid state electronics, he doesn't even know if I'll be able to get in there and the map is still there. So if the map isn't there, that is beyond my expertise. So the wiring was done by Motec, my friend G, who's like the master at doing it. He's still doing it, so I could enlist his help to get me there. But Motec has now moved back east. They used to be in Huntington Beach when these cars were done. So that creates a problem. As far as getting everything set initially to get it to run, I can do the tuning here on my dyno, which even that is quite time consuming, especially if you're starting from zero. But getting all the initial setup done, that was all done by them. And then most of us from there take it and continue on. So I'm not exactly sure where we're going to end up here. But the plan is to try and put the M4 software on the NSX computer, which normally we wouldn't do, but we're just trying to see if we can talk to the computer to get in there to see what will happen. Simon believes for sure that we can access the diagnostic side, but he just does not know if the map or everything is going to be contained in there. And if it's not, I don't know. I have no idea. It will be a process. So as usual, we just try and stay positive and keep moving forward. But the main thing is I just want to keep you informed of what's going on so you can kind of see. Now let's talk about for your own cars. A lot of you are making drift cars. I don't see that drag racing is quite as prevalent anymore, but drag race cars or cars that you want to just modify and have on the street to have a good time with. There's so many options. So all I can do is pass on my experience, what I dealt with. I've dealt with all of them. Piggybacks, inlines, signal modifiers, standalones. It really just depends on what your end result is. I mean, if you want to be a full-blown race car, definitely the way to go is standalone, in my opinion. You know, in the top three, always Motec, AEM's really good. I don't have any experience with Adaptronic, but Abel tells me they're right up there and really good as well. So, and I'm sure there are a whole bunch of others that you guys like, but standalones are great. I mean, that's the bottom line, because you're usually getting that top-notch material, the stuff that isn't just going to go bad over time that you see in a normal production car. I can show you guys an example right now because my mom's 3000 GT has suffered the same fate as a 7, except obviously less extreme. But all the fuel system, I'm going through that car as well, and at the same time, that car lost its ECU. So it came in to be repaired here, so we can take a look at this. And I've also pulled apart the M4 for the RX-7, just so you can take a look and see what's going on. For those of you that have not taken apart your ECU, when you start having trouble, and the car just won't run right, and you've gone through everything else, it's definitely worth taking a look at. And when you go in there, what you want to look at is take a look at the board, take a look at all the capacitors, look for anything that's leaking. If you have any sort of fluid, it looks almost like a grease. That's everything breaking down. If that happens, then you're pretty much screwed. You need to send it out and get it repaired. I would have preferred to have just used an AEM computer and called it a day, since JC is one of the owners of AEM. He would have taken care of it for me. The problem with that is that my mom has an automatic, and they don't make a computer for her car, so I didn't have a choice. And my second choice would have been buy a brand new ECU from Mitsubishi, also not available. So the only thing I was left to do is to have it repaired. Now the Motec, look at the components. This M4, 20 years old, is state of the art. I mean, there's not even a comparison in the quality. This is what you get when you spend a ton of money. So in my opinion, is it worth it? We're going to find out for sure. I'll tell you why. The board looks perfect. The real question is it going to work? If that works, it's got my vote of confidence, worth every penny. If it doesn't work, probably time to reevaluate. But the stuff is as good as it gets. And as I was going through, even this is what's in the NSX. This is its spare. So if you guys want to go racing, or whether or not it's your street car, I carry spares of everything. The one thing I will say is that with the RX-7 and the NSX, even though we carry spare Motecs for everything, in my entire career, I never had to use one. If you're going to run a factory computer and it's an older car, you might consider picking up a spare ECU before they don't have them anymore. I mean, that would just be my advice. Unfortunately, you're kind of up against the same thing though, because even if you would get a new one that's been out of production for a while, the time span you have, it's going to be limited before things are going to start going south. So you really have three options in the ECU. You actually have more than three, but these are the three primary prevalent ones you'll find. You've got the factory ECU, you run an inline, like auxiliary computer, and honestly, that's what I ran in the RX-7. I ran all the way into the 9s with that. It was great, but limited. And it's very hard to diagnose what's going on because it's changing the signal. It's coming in on one side and going out the other. So it's tricking the car, so it doesn't know exactly what's going on. It'll functionally work and you can dial it in. The problem being is that it's insanely hard to diagnose, even with the scope, even if you're an engineer, because you don't know exactly what it's trying to output. So you have no reference. If you designed it, you're good. But if you're on the East Coast and the person who designed it's on the West Coast, you could have some potential problems. Just something to think about. That's the same thing with signal interpreters. You know, they'll just modify, let's say, the map sensor or the cooling sensor. They'll use those to change the fuel delivery if you're going to supercharge. It's just hard to figure out what's going on. Then, of course, in my opinion, top of the line, standalone. Everything is traceable. Log everything. Everything diagnoses itself. It's the way to go, but the price is steep. So for a street car, I don't know. That's something for you to decide. For my street cars, no. I mean, and it's not an issue of could I afford it. It's an issue of it's just overkill. And the problem being is that emissions, that's something you want to think about as well. If you're talking about emissions, you have one of these. Now, if you change the forced induction, you've got a problem because you really can't put it back or the car's not going to run. But if you're just changing your timing or your fuel delivery, you could probably sneak through by actually unplugging and plugging back in this and then passing emissions. The one problem would be like in my 996 Turbo. Okay, I changed the DME, which for all you JDM guys, ECU. Okay, when I changed it, the problem is that the DME has an internal clock on it. So warranty, I had my transmission go out. So what I had to do was I had two DMEs, one which had the modified maps in it, and I kept the original one. So what I had to do was I had to send the original one to Germany when I had the breakdown. They reconfigured it, changed the mileage to what was on my modified ECU and what was in the car. That way it went back, and when they went to the dealer, they had no idea that I'd changed anything, and they covered it under warranty. Is that a hassle? Yes, but is it more of a hassle to spend all the money on a new trans? Yes. So for me, it just kind of depends on what works for you. But there's definitely strategies to get around all this stuff. It's just talking to the right people. So that's something all of you can consider and see what works best for you. The other side of that is the wiring. I mean, the wiring on just the RX-7 or the NSX, it costs as much as a small car, but it's top of the line. You know, it's built for that. It has all Raychem, self-extinguishing heat shrink, self-extinguishing insulation on the wires. Everything is super light. It's really great stuff. But unless you want to be a professional racer, I mean, the cost is just astronomical. And if it's on your tab, I don't know if it'd be worth it. That's something only you can decide. But the two other options are that I've seen is one is you could actually rewire the car and not use all the expensive race stuff. And also, Raychem is sealed. It's shrunk up. It's difficult to work on. You have to cut everything open if there's a problem, patch it all up. You know, my good friend JC is building just an insane Studebaker, off the charts, and has access to anything on the planet. On his car, he's actually using loom that can open up and he can work on because of that reason. He wants access to work on it. And I bet you it'd be a whole lot cheaper. So that's something you might want to consider if you're doing your own car. Now, if I was doing just for street, for myself, the other way to do it if you want to run standalone is an adapter. So you have your factory harness plug, an adapter that plugs in there, and then on the other side you could plug in your standalone engine management. It's very rare that companies will ever advertise that because of the emissions deal. You're really not supposed to be doing that, obviously, you all know that. But if you talk to them and you get to know people, there are people still doing it. And you can find out who's doing it and possibly get it done for your car. If you're doing some street, some track, a mixture of both, that is probably the most cost-effective way. And then the middle of the road, you build a new harness. You just use components that aren't top shelf, or just go full boat, get the whole thing. If money's no object, that's the way you want to go. So just some things to think about that I can pass on to you that I've had experience with. When they build the harnesses for the race cars, this is a mil-spec plug. They're all built like this. I mean, it's amazing. You know, none of that stuff where you guys are pulling your engine and you have to pull the plug out of the ECU and run it through the firewall. This stuff all disconnects at the firewall. It is much easier to work on. It's built to take apart, but it comes at a cost. I mean, it's just really expensive. So in any case, I pass that on to you. That's the part that relates to your vehicle. And for myself, I just keep working on all this stuff that seems to be endless, but what can you do, right? And on that note, I'll see you next time.